Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Empowered Patient Podcast. Today, I have a wonderful guest that I'm very excited to speak with about all of the very things that are interesting about nutrition and cancer care and how to empower your own journey. Without further ado, I'd love to invite you to meet Cathy. Hi.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for
I'm
having me,
great.
Tiffany.
My pleasure. So tell us how you got into this space and what exactly you do.
Yeah, so I am a dietitian and I'm also a breast cancer survivor. So I'll give you the really quick backstory of how those two things melded together to bring me to where I am now. So in 2014, I was running my private nutrition practice and personal training studio. And I worked as a lifestyle and eating disorder dietitian as well as a personal trainer. And I had a thriving business and I loved helping my clients use nutrition and fitness to reduce disease risk and heal and optimize their health. And in October of that same year, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh, no. Sorry.
And thanks. Yeah, that's kind of what I said. And after I finished treatment, I knew that I wanted to combine my personal breast cancer experience with my professional nutrition expertise to help other women in the breast cancer community. But I didn't know what that would look like. I had no idea. I just felt called to somehow blend those two things and be able to help. And so what I did was I went on a mission as I continued to run my nutrition therapy practice and my personal training studio for a few years. I went on a mission to figure out what that would look like. And women repeatedly began sharing with me how it was so frustrating to not be able to get consistent breast cancer nutrition diet information.
Sure.
And how it felt overwhelming to figure out what to eat or what to avoid.
Right.
And how those challenges led to anxiety about food. And I remembered when I was preparing for my own radiation treatment, even I, an experienced dietitian at the time that happened, I had been a dietitian for like almost 20 years.
Right.
But I was not an oncology dietitian. So even though I was experienced and I knew my nutrition science inside and out, I questioned my diet.
Sure.
And so I, having a million amazing dietitian colleagues, I knew exactly who to call. And I reached out to one of my colleague friends, told her what was going on, asked for her help. And with that, when I left that meeting, I just had such peace of mind because I knew enough to know what I didn't know. And because I was not an oncology dietitian, I was like, am I missing something? And I had reviewed the research. I felt really comfortable with what I was doing, but I wanted someone to put their eyeballs on it who knew and who could validate and confirm what I was doing. So I had this peace of mind that was literally, I could feel it in my body when I left my meeting with my colleague friend. And I realized that this is how I can help. And so, because every woman with breast cancer really deserves that same peace of mind.
Yeah.
In time, my Peaceful Plate program was born. And that's how
All right. So let's fast forward because I really want to get to this Peaceful Plate because I know people are really dying to hear about that because I think it's really interesting and very helpful. Go ahead.
Okay. So, so when you and I were emailing back and forth about some of the things to talk about, on our podcast together, I was thinking about something that's kind of a universal challenge for women in the breast cancer community.
Sure.
And that is, they really struggle with the anxiety around food. They are confused and overwhelmed about what to do. So at its core, that's what the Peaceful Plate does. That is what my program addresses. If you recall, I mentioned I worked as an eating disorder dietitian. And so this idea of food fear and food anxiety and second guessing and feeling guilt and shame and just, beating yourself up for quote unquote eating the wrong thing or eating too much of something that you hadn't planned on eating and restricting and then bouncing to the other extreme of overeating. All of that was an area of nutrition work that I was very comfortable with. I had a lot of training in. And lo and behold, it's very common in the breast cancer community.
Sure.
And so there are a million ways that someone who's been diagnosed with breast cancer or who has finished treatment, they can find information on what to eat. It's everywhere.
Sure.
What happens is they don't trust it. They're not sure if it's right for them. Maybe it's too restrictive and they're not sure, how long they can quote unquote follow something that restrictive. They know, quote unquote, what to do. Like really, I always say most adults over the age of 5 know what's best to eat. It doesn't mean they do it. And that's
I
okay.
say that all the time.
Yeah, there's no judgment there. We all know it.
We know what we're supposed to eat, right?
It doesn't mean we do it. And
Sure.
especially what happens with all this, maybe there's dieting culture issues that someone comes to a diagnosis with. They've been battling their weight up and down on and off diets their whole life. Maybe there's trauma, sexual trauma or dieting trauma, body image, all of those things that you are struggling with as a woman with food and weight and body image. At the time of diagnosis, when you go into treatment, it's like throwing gasoline on a little spark and it just kind of explodes. And whatever food issues you struggled with before, maybe it's comfort eating, maybe it's stress eating, maybe it's, I've had a hard day, so I deserve a pint of ice cream kind of eating, whatever it is. Whatever that was, it doesn't go away with a breast cancer diagnosis. As I was saying, it gets bigger. And so those are coping mechanisms, and they're just the way someone's probably always navigated their relationship with food. But now with a diagnosis and treatment, and then even afterward, women are second guessing and feeling guilty about those behaviors. And so my program, like I said, there are a million ways to figure out what to eat, but my program really focuses on healing that food anxiety. And ending the overwhelm and the confusion about food. Because there's a phrase that goes through, members of my program, women who come in there, it's food trauma. And we were all on a group call one day. Every week I do a live coaching and education call with my group. We were talking food trauma. I don't remember if I said it or someone else. I think I said it. And someone who was on the call said, that is exactly what we struggle with, is food trauma. But sometimes women will hear that and they're like, that is too big. I don't think I have food trauma, but I do worry about what I'm eating. I second guess it. I'm afraid what I'm eating will make my cancer worse if I've been newly diagnosed, or if I'm finished with treatment, it will trigger recurrence. So I don't really care what someone calls it. It's just, if it's that challenge with food, that's something that most other programs, I would say, don't address that component. And so that's what the Peaceful Plate is about.
So many very interesting things there that I'd love to comment on. First of all, and I just want to say that from an oncologist point of view, I have always pointed out to a lot of my patients that psychological issues, whatever your predisposition is, those always get magnified at the times of distress, such as having a cancer diagnosis. And so if you happen to have anxiety, that absolutely is going to come out. If you had an obsession about being in control of certain things, that whole desire also gets augmented. And so I completely understand this idea with the food trauma and having difficulty managing their food choices, especially if you've had that issue in the past, which so many women have. The other thing that I find very refreshing about your approach is that you're not actually telling patients what to eat. Is that right? Or you're really just helping coach them to making acceptable choices and being good with them. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, and I learned this a long time ago in my work as a dietitian in private practice.
Sure.
Telling someone what to do, and know this, you're a physician. I mean, it goes in, it goes out, and people put up resistance. That is not the answer. I have learned that again years ago. And so what I do is I bring people all in one place, the current guidelines and recommendations through the American Institute for Cancer Research, all of the, the top, research efforts that we have at this time in cancer and nutrition and physical activity. I bring that together in one place, and I have educational modules that everyone who comes into my program can access and go through at their leisure. But none of them say, eat this, don't eat that. What they give, because I always say, we've got to take the guidelines and then tailor them to your likes and dislikes. So for example, if someone says to me, Cathy, I know I keep reading broccoli is so beneficial for breast cancer, but I hate broccoli, but I'm eating it anyway. And so first, I would not say, well, that's good. You need to keep eating it because that's what I think you should eat. That's ridiculous. Why eat something you don't like? You're a grown up. You can eat anything you want at any time you want. But if you look at the research, we know what it is about broccoli. It's in the cruciferous, brassica vegetable, family. let's look at what other vegetables fall into that category that can give you those same benefits or very similar benefits that maybe you do like. And then how do we take those and how do you use those, weave them into your diet, on a regular basis. So it's really about giving them the education, the evidence-based nutrition guidelines. And so they have that. Because I find that when someone has the factual information, that's very comforting because like, oh, I understand what this
now
is.
I understand why I need that.
And it's all in one place. People tend to go to the research and try to pull it all together. And you can't make guidelines or recommendations from one study here or one study there. I mean, there are such, and I guide people through putting together, an eating plan for themselves using prompts and, a workbook that kind of walks them through, well, here's what we're looking at. Here's what we can work with. It's kind of like putting the puzzle pieces together that work for you. So you're right. I do not tell people what to eat because that's the food police and I am not the food police.
So I don't know if this is an appropriate thing to ask you, but how do you feel about supplements? So for example, if you really can't stand broccoli and you can't learn to like broccoli, I happen to like broccoli. I don't like a lot of things, but I do like broccoli. But say that you can't stomach broccoli, and we know that there are certain components in it that are very beneficial for the diet and potentially longevity and cancer prevention. Sulforaphane, for example, right, are one of the components of broccoli that is supposed to be so helpful. How do you feel about taking a supplement if you can't get it in diet-wise?
So supplements are called supplements for a reason. They supplement the diet, and they're not regulated. And we don't have any research that suggests that any particular supplement definitely, reduces cancer recurrence risk or ends cancer or cures cancer or any of the things. And I am not anti-supplement. Let me just make that clear at the onset. But I feel like, to your point, if someone said to me, I don't like broccoli, or maybe they can't stomach it. I work with people who have concomitant issues that are managed with food. Maybe it's digestion. Maybe they can't eat raw vegetables. Maybe they have a FODMAP issue. There are all kinds of things that could also be going on. So I want to look at all of that first. But if they don't like broccoli, and we go through the list of all the other cruciferous vegetables that have sulforaphane as a component that's a beneficial compound, is there nothing on this list that you can eat? Nothing. Absolutely zero.
If you ask my kids, probably not. My kids used to joke that lettuce was my attempt at poisoning them to death.
Well, kids do think that universally, but
they're
hopefully
in their
we're
20s now, and I think they still think that.
Okay, that's fine. Some people you just got to meet them where they are and go, great, okay, so eat some extra fruit, because if you think about it, the main recommendation dietarily for breast cancer or any cancer, and really, let's just pull out and look for a healthy overall human being, is to eat a plant-based diet. So that means put more plants on your plate. And fruit is plant and vegetables are plant. So if vegetables aren't your thing, broccoli's not your thing, I would not say, great, let's supplement with DIM-3 carbonyl. That would not be my recommendation. It would be, well, let's look what else we could maybe plug in place of that. And let's just eat more of what you like rather than none of any of it. Because there's a tendency to think, well, if I can't eat the broccoli, then I should just eat nothing because nothing else really has that much nutrition. I'm like, who said other vegetables don't have nutrition that will help support your breast and overall health if it ain't broccoli? I mean, there are a lot of choices. So
what are 3 choices that you'd recommend somebody that can't eat broccoli, for example?
Well, if we're in that whole cruciferous vegetable, there's kale, there's cabbage, there's bok choy, Brussels sprouts. I mean, these are some heavy hitting vegetables, But people are like, well, I don't like cabbage. I'm like, do you like sauerkraut? Love sauerkraut. But that's cabbage. It's just in another form.
And the coleslaw. You like coleslaw?
It's fermented, and fermented supports gut health. So that helps immune system. So all of this supports breast health. So and coleslaw, you think of the form, maybe you don't like, cooked cabbage like your mom used to make it, or soggy and gray and had no flavor, but maybe you like it roasted, which is a cool way to make cabbage. Maybe you like it, lightly sauteed with, like Asian noodles in, like a vegetable lo mein. Maybe, to your point, a coleslaw, or maybe, like I said, there are a million different ways to add it in. And that's one of the other, I like to say, one of my superpowers is to help people figure out there's more than one way to eat coleslaw, or more than one way to eat cabbage or broccoli. And maybe the way you're thinking of it is there are lots of other possibilities. Have you considered? So also in my program, I have a recipe library, and every month a new recipe drops. So people, because every recipe in there is loaded with ingredients that all support health. So maybe we could find you a recipe in the library that has one of those cruciferous vegetables that you're like, that is not a deterrent to me eating it. I will try that. So it's trial and error, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this brings me back to my children who, again, were difficult, picky eaters when they were younger. We took them to a hibachi place, and they wouldn't try the shrimp, and they didn't want the vegetables, the sauteed vegetables. And, they only wanted the chicken and the noodles and the rice. So we made them try a bite of a shrimp, for example, in the ginger sauce that they give you at this hibachi restaurant, and they loved it. Yeah. So it turns out that this ginger sauce was my method of feeding them all sorts of different things to help teach their palate to like other things. Mm-hmm. I would go once a week to this hibachi place, and I would buy a pint of this ginger sauce, and everybody would get a little cup in front of their dip. You can dip whatever you want in it. You can use as much of it as you want. It's ginger sauce. It's not going to hurt you. And lo and behold, I got them to learn to eat so many things through the magic of ginger sauce, because they like the ginger sauce. So there's always a way. I mean, something that you might like it for, Absolutely. Of course, we don't want people like pouring, ketchup with just all sugar all over everything, but there's got to be something out there that you could use to flavor or, sort of bring it more to your taste sort of thing.
Well, kids love to dip. So that was a double whammy for them. They're like, we can dip and we like the flavor. Right. And to your point about ketchup and full of sugar, I mean, some are, some aren't. It's label reading is important. I mean, there's a lot that goes into helping yourself eat as well as you can, as often as you can.
Right, right.
So understanding what to look for on labels, not just the nutrition facts, but the ingredients is important, and recognizing that, sometimes you've got to kind of disguise food to make it, not palatable, because again, I'm not a fan of eating food you don't like. I was really picky as a kid too. My mom said she asked the doctor if I could live on Cheerios and peanut butter, and he said, yeah, just give her a multivitamin. And look, I grew up, I'm fine. I still love peanut butter. I'm not a fan of Cheerios because that's just not my favorite thing. But if you think about it, palates change over time. Right. And what I find is that so many women, when they have that diagnosis, generally, not always, but often, maybe they paid attention to their diet before to keep them skinny. Like weight loss or staying skinny is the way I'm going to pay attention to diet, or I'm eating healthy this week. And then they fall off the wagon and they go way overboard the other direction. Then they come back. So they deal with that over and over. But now that there's breast cancer in the picture, they tend to say, well, this maybe is a wake-up call to look at how I'm taking care of myself diet-wise, and sleep and fitness, all of the things. And it's not about becoming this like evangelist, nutrition evangelist, which I've seen. Don't touch ketchup, it has sugar. Don't ever eat this, it has that. Like, no, that is not going to serve you long term. Right. And it's really finding, like when we were chatting before, we had sent a form back and forth, and one of the things I was talking about were principles to help people eat with peace, because that's really what I focus on, is helping women eat with peace, not panic, and enjoy their food again. And one of them is to really, it's called permanent, is one of my principles, because you've got to figure out how you can eat permanently for the rest of your life. Right. Because anyone can do a really restrictive, tight-fisted, white-knuckle your way through it kind of crazy diet for a week or two or a month. But can you do that when you decide to go celebrate the end of your treatment in Tahiti? Can you do that when you go to a big Thanksgiving dinner with your family who lives, like I'm in the Chicago area, my family all lives in central Illinois. They do not eat the same way in different areas of the country. So think about how you can get something under your belt that permanently allows you to eat wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and the knowledge to read labels, understand menus, understand how food works in your body. That's the piece that is a game changer in that respect, because then you're in charge of it. And you're not, a lot of times you mentioned earlier about people, how things are accelerated when you have a cancer diagnosis, challenges you've had. Food is one way women try to control what's going on in their life. It's how they try to cope with what's going on in their life. And so whether it's control or cope, either one of those C's, that's also probably not something someone can sustain long term. In fact, I know it's not. So how do we find a way to navigate nutrition in a way that is peaceful, for lack of a better word? Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Another one that I know is always very big in nutrition for breast cancer patients. What do you tell women about soy? And what to do about it? Because I've had patients, for example, that have come to me with, their vitamins and showing me the label that there's some soy in it, and they don't want to take it because they have hormone receptor positive breast cancer. And for the most part, I assure them that amount of soy is certainly not is probably negligible. But there's some question as to whether or not patients should be drinking soy milk. Should they be eating tofu? Or what do you think about that?
Okay, so a few things.
Yeah.
There's soy in a supplement.
Yeah.
And there are soy foods that are whole foods, that are plant-based foods that are thousands of years old. So those are two different things.
Perfect.
And it's not, and I always say it's not what I think about soy, it's what the research shows, especially, if we look at the American Institute for Cancer Research, the current research shows us that even for women who have hormone receptor positive breast cancer, which is the type I had, which is the most common type, subtype, soy is not dangerous in terms of, being afraid of it to trigger recurrence. And I say that because it's interesting to me that I do hear that a lot from women still. Like, is soy okay? Should I not eat soy sauce? First of all, soy sauce doesn't have phytoestrogens in it. It's been processed enough that's not the concern. I'm more concerned about the sodium level and how often you eat it. Soy sauce is, depending on your culture, probably not something you eat daily and gallons of. So we've got to look at, I always talk about quantity, quality, and frequency of food to see what the impact is it's making on the diet. But to your point about the soy, old data was done on animal studies where the amount of whole soy foods that they were, using in these experiments was much higher than what humans would be consuming on a regular basis. And animal studies don't translate to human studies. I mean, they're interesting to do further studies, but we're not small animals or big animals. We're not big animals. It's small. So the research currently indicates that soy is safe for women who have had even hormone receptor positive breast cancer. And I always like to remind my clients who are in my program, as well as like this conversation we're having, I am all of them. Why would I eat something? Soy is a regular part of my diet. Whole soy foods, tofu. Tempeh, just had tempeh last night. Again, that's fermented. It feeds and supports good gut health. And, we're looking for that healthy gut microbiome. And how do we eat to support that? Soy milk every day when I have my smoothie or if I make oatmeal. And I know I'm comfortable with what the research shows. And so when people ask me, what's your opinion? I would say, it's not my opinion. It is what the research shows. But what do I do personally? That's a different question. I include it in my diet. So I'm like, I don't know how else to try to help you feel comfortable about that if someone asks me, other than to say, here's what the research says and here's what I do. And I swear to God, that's what I do. I'm not. Obviously,
as an oncologist and a scientist, I am very adept at reading research and trying to apply it in clinical fashion. But, as you did point out, the research is not necessarily good research. And so, you have to also very much weigh out, how useful the study was, how well it was, done, and was it properly controlled for? Were the right control groups utilized? Were there, what was the question they were asking? And the question that you're asking, is it the same question, or are you trying to extrapolate from that study? And so that's more of what I was talking about when I asked you, like, what do you think? It's not really that I think that the studies are pretty weak, unfortunately. And I don't know, I think most of the studies that I think are most helpful are more of the epidemiology types of studies, the ones that are looking at women in Japan who eat a particular diet and have more soy intake versus a different diet, that type of thing. But, we're probably getting too academic for this type of a chat anyway. I was just trying to bring up a controversial topic that I know a lot of women would ask about.
Yeah, no, I think you make some really great points because, what I do is, you're right. If we look at just individual studies in and of themselves on their own, maybe there is weak research out there, because there always is some, So collectively, using the American Institute for Cancer Research, the World Cancer Research Foundation, using that information, you've got to have one source that provides guidelines and recommendations for everyone. And that's what those organizations do. They cull the information, they put out a report every so many years. And so using that as the starting point, what's the current recommendation? Maybe the research isn't strong enough to make a specific recommendation at this point, but here's what it's pointing to. So you can always parse the data to find some, well, this is a weaker study, that's a stronger study, that's epidemiology. And even to your point about Japan, there are a lot of things about women who grow up, they're looking at, in Japan, you eat tofu and soy when you're a very young child.
Right.
Into adulthood. And one of the things that research looks at is that protective? In our country, that's not a common part of the diet. Yeah. So maybe, maybe there's a different outcome in, people in our culture eating soy than if you can't really compare that to Japan and those outcomes. So you've got to look at it broadly. Yeah. And nutrition, diet is really hard to study long term.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
If you and I went out to lunch and we both had tofu stir fry with broccoli.
Would never happen.
Okay, let's pretend. If we both went out to lunch and had tofu stir fry in another life, in an alternative universe, and
that's
we had
my broccoli, by the way,
and extra broccoli, because I like extra broccoli.
I'll
and
eat the broccoli.
Sauce.
I won't eat the tofu, but okay.
We're going to pretend in our alternate universe.
Okay.
And then we did, let's say, like a biopsy of our gut microbiome and our, the metabolizing and the digestion. We'd have a little difference going on, how you utilize the soy and how I utilize the soy.
Yep.
At the same time, even with the broccoli and all the other components of our delicious meal. But that's one of the things that makes nutrition and diet so tricky to study. And so when we look at the real science behind it, is it's hard to get long-term outcomes. People lie on food logs. A lot of research in nutrition relies on self-report. No, of course you haven't. Relies on self-report. I know y'all lie about what you're eating because you feel weird about it. Right. So given all of that, it's murky and complicated. And so I always lead with that. Listen, here's what we know today. Here's what the research shows. If you want the citation, I'll provide it for you. But if you say, I don't believe that, that's cool. Then keep digging and find the research that works for you. But I know what I use in my work. And to your point, also, that this is what I'll land on here is, I love that you're at least looking at the nutrition research, because oncologists are not trained in nutrition.
No.
You guys are rock stars at managing our side effects, our medications, our treatment protocol, all the things, not nutrition. So referring to oncology dietitians, if you have them at your center, or sending, saying, here's a program I know is a resource that really goes deep, because the dietitians at centers, there's like one dietitian to 2,100 patients. They're stretched thin, and maybe you can get an appointment 3 months from now and you get 20 minutes and you just want to know what to buy at the grocery store on your way home from your doctor appointment.
Sure.
So that's why I like to get the word out about me as a resource. Like, if you're challenged with the food on all these, in these areas, you can do this tomorrow. You could, come in and let me help you, rather than trying to figure it out all on your own and still be confused. Because how many people say to me, my oncologist said, and I'm like, yeah. And I get lots of different answers about that. My oncologist said this, and sometimes I'm like, that's interesting. Eat in moderation. I'm like, my moderation, your moderation are probably two different things. So it's, nutrition is really kind of, I always think of nutrition as the little punching bag that just kind of gets beat up on all the time.
I got very interested in the nutrition component because, a lot of actually the medications that we're using now, I think, are somewhat affected by your microbiome. For example, immunotherapy. They've actually shown that there's a substantial correlation between how a patient responds to immunotherapy and the health of their microbiome. So that, I think, is a very interesting component. But I was a molecular biologist when in undergraduate at Princeton, and that, sort of shades how I look at a lot of these things, and is probably part of the reasons I went into oncology. I actually think that all of these things will at some point be better managed, better analyzed, and understood at a genomic level. Because, for example, functional genomics is looking at, what our polymorphisms are. And a polymorphism, for those of you who don't know, are just little changes in your DNA at certain genes, for example. So you and I both have gene X, but I might have the variety that's AB and you might have the variety that's BB. And, if A functions better than B, then AB might work better than BB. I hope that makes sense. But at any rate, so people process medications, supplements, foods, all things that they take into their body, even the air and the vitamin D that they make through their skin, all things are processed by our genome. And there's an interplay with our microbiome as well. And so, I think at some point, this whole question of nutrition, who digests soy differently, how I process it versus how you process it, could make it beneficial for you and not beneficial for me. And I don't think any of those types of things have been really worked out at this point. And I don't know that I'll live long enough to see the day when that type of science comes to fruition. But in my mind, you heard it here first, that's where it's coming. That's where it's going. It's where it has to go.
1,000%. This is a conversation. I don't know if people watching this are like, this is boring or this is
what is she talking about?
This makes me so excited. It's like,
me too.
I love this stuff because nutritional genomics, I'll never forget. I went to a nutritional genomics conference workshop years ago, like right after I became a dietitian, because I'm fascinated by that. We're not all the same. And I always say the holy grail for us in the nutrition field is to be able to tailor diets to someone specifically based on, I think this would be great, on their subtype of breast cancer or any cancer for that matter,
100%.
But breast cancer subtype, like you said, the genome, the microbiome, the whole thing, digestion, metabolism rates. I mean, you can have, if you think about like rate limiting steps in a pathway, for digestion and metabolism, some people slowly metabolize caffeine. Some people are fast metabolizers. It's the same, like to your point, with everything we ingest. And that will be the holy grail of having tailored
100%.
specific nutrition. And I'm with you. I don't know if I'll live long enough, but boy, would I love to, because I think that'll be a game changer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
cool.
For the audience, just to, simplify it a little bit more, for example, okay, there is a gene, which is actually more common than we originally thought, called MTHFR. And what that gene does is it helps the person's body metabolize things like folic acid. And if you don't have that gene and you eat cereal that has folic acid in it, or you take a folic acid supplement, your body can't use it because it's unable to convert it into the active form. So if you can't use the active form of folic acid, you're basically taking in this vitamin and your body can't use it, and it actually could become toxic. So it's important for people to know at some point, at least some of these genes that we look at, for example. So I actually have that gene. That gene also affects women's ability to metabolize tamoxifen and utilize it properly. And we don't even routinely test for that gene in oncology because it was thought that it was so rare that it wasn't really relevant. But if you have it, maybe it's a problem. So for example, for me, I have to take a specialized form of folic acid that already has a methyl group on it because my body can't do that. And if I hadn't done my genes, I don't think I would have ever known that. Right?
Yeah. That's exactly right. I mean, it just, as we continue to study nutrition, and, I always say we don't eat nutrition, we eat food. And so, the idea of having an orange or something, the folate, I remember, well, to your point about folate, I could go off on another thing. So I'll stay focused. Like, remember when folate deficiency was contributing to spina bifida rates, high spina bifida rates. So
which is a birth defect.
So fortifying cereals and such with folate really shifted that. That was a public health, nutrition decision there that had such a beneficial impact. But to your point, again, not everyone with folate or whatever, what have you, even vitamin C, even caffeine, the other things, not everyone metabolizes and processes the same way. So until we get there, which will be just so amazing, we've got to work with what we have. And, and I always talk, I remind people, you're not a statistic, you're a human. You have certain likes and dislikes with certain foods. Your body responds differently to certain foods. There's some people are more salt sensitive. Some people tend to be more sensitive to carbohydrate, blood sugar shifts and such. So let's look at all of that, because we eat food, not nutrients. We eat food, not nutrition. So nutrition is how food works in your body. It's the science of how food works in your body. So let's look at the real food.
Right. So this has absolutely been fascinating. We've done like a full circle here.
Yeah.
So tell the audience how we can reach you if somebody would like to work with you on the Powered Plate.
Oh yeah, on the Peaceful Plate. So yeah,
Peaceful
sure.
Plate.
Thank
I'm
you.
so sorry.
Yeah, no, your power. Well, it's all power. It is power.
The Powerful Peaceful Plate. Right.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe I'll change the name now. So yeah, they can find me on Instagram. I'm at thehormone.breastcancer.dietitian. I have a podcast called the Peaceful Plate Podcast. You can go to my website, which is cathyleman.com. It's Cathy with a C and Leman without an H. It's CATHYLEMAN. And those are the places I am most often. I'm also on Facebook, but I don't do as much there. I'm primarily my podcast. I also have a blog that you can link to on my website, cathyleman.com. You can click on the blog there. The podcast is there. There's information about the Peaceful Plate program. The program, I run it as an application only program because I want to hear what women's challenges are with their nutrition. And if they, are struggling with some food concerns that aren't something that I.
Oh no.
Oh, there we are. Are we still together?
We are. I don't know if we're still streaming or not, but
I don't know. Anyway, the application, I just like to make sure that what I can offer to help someone with is something they're struggling with. And if not, I have a lot of colleagues I can refer to. But so those are the main places: the website, the podcast, my blog, and Instagram.
All right. I just put up a QR code, the right QR code. And if you are watching this, you can scan it and it should take you to Cathy Leman's website, which I'm assuming everything is linked to, right?
Yeah.
And also everyone to know that I will put in the show notes below all of these links that she has mentioned, as well as some of the links to the nutrition sites that she was mentioning. And I think that this has been a really interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Cathy. Any last words for our audience?
The main things I say is just when you eat for your breast health, you're eating for your overall best health. So it's not like when you eat broccoli, it just helps your boobs. It helps everything. So remember that, right? And keep things simple. Don't overcomplicate your nutrition. People want you to think the more complicated you make it, the more effective it is. And the reverse is true. So keep it simple and give yourself grace when you're eating, maybe something that you feel like you shouldn't be having, because life is too short to beat yourself up about your food. But Tiffany, thank you so much. This was great. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. It was very fun.
We have to continue this. We'll have lunch and talk about functional genomics and nutritional genomics.
Oh my God. I love that too. That's makes me that's like kryptonite in a good way.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you found this interesting and entertaining, and I will see you next time. Bye.